Welcome everyone to our IRPE landscape, a decade of change and opportunity. My name is Brad Trimble. I am the Director of Learning and Strategy for the RPE Group. I'm very excited to bring this offering to everybody today. It's been quite some time that the RPE Group has been focused on trying to develop guided pathways for everybody in our field. And this webinar is intended to be one of those opportunities for folks to kind of navigate this profession, and we hope to help bring it to our students at some point too. So this is kind of a good starting point here to kick off this discussion for our field. And like I said, hopefully broaden the ranks here as we move into the future. Some of the session learning objectives that we have for today are to provide insights on common career trajectories for IRPE professionals in the California Community Colleges system, learn about regional differences in salaries, costs of living considerations, and career advancement opportunities, and also to share advice about how some might position themselves for career advancement within the California Community Colleges system. So I'm joined today by some esteemed panelists. Here's who's in the room today. I've already introduced myself, but I'd like to turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Loris Fagioli, and I am the Director of Institutional Research at Irvine Valley College.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Su. I'm a research analyst at Irvine Valley College.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bree Hayes. I serve as the Senior Dean of Institutional Effectiveness, Success, and Equity at Cuyamaca College.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina King, President at San Diego College of Continuing Education, but also a former Director of Institutional Research and Planning.
Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Lawler. I'm the Dean of Institutional Research at Santa Monica College.
And with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Loris.
Hi, everyone. So this will be a two-part. First, Kevin and I will show you, I think, a pretty cool analysis that we've done with some data that we scraped from the web that will go into details to kind of show you how the institutional research landscape has changed over the last 10 years. And I think we found some interesting things. Some of it, I think, confirms maybe some people who have been in the system, maybe some nuggets that are maybe a little bit unique. And what I'm extremely excited about is afterwards we'll have a panel with all the people that you see right now and kind of giving a little bit their trajectory and seeing their advice or how they see their trajectory has happened over time. So we will look at these few things. However, we've already presented a version of this at the Summer Institute, and there is something very important that we want to let you know. So we are talking about trajectory and professional growth. And sometimes professional growth can be advancement in terms of position. So you move from analyst to senior and director. However, that does not mean that professional advancement is always associated, or professional growth always has to be with position changes. So we want to be very clear if we say moving up or director versus senior versus analyst, we do not want to make any value statements there. We do believe that it's important for us to understand what the landscape looks like, but that does not imply that this is a requirement or a suggestion that something is better than or that you can do better off. But I think the panelists can explain to you very well that different positions have different foci, and I think it is very important for us to know once you move to a different position, sometimes your lens changes and you lose certain things. You maybe miss certain things that you've had in your prior position, but you gain certain experiences or gain certain insights on different elements. So we want to be very clear as we move through here. We hope that this is important to you, but we don't want to tell you that moving up or moving to a different position is a requirement or a value statement that something is better than the other. So we want to be very clear about that. All right, with that said, we can go to our first slide, and Kevin can tell you a little bit how we went about doing the data analysis piece.
Thanks, Loris. So yeah, in spring 2023, Loris and I were having a conversation. We were wondering, how has the field come? Because I think we always talk about that we've become much more data driven in terms of our equity policies. We always talk about data in terms of making decisions. So we kind of wanted to see what the landscape's kind of looking like now. So we kind of had a unique data sources for this for this study. So we actually went into Transparent California and we counted up all the positions that are related to institutional research. We also went to all of your college websites and looked at your positions from the salary schedule, step 1 all the way to the max step. And then I think many of you might have had a hint of it because I think on your LinkedIn it shows you might have been wondering why Kevin Sue's been looking at your LinkedIn for the past year. We looked at your LinkedIns as well just to see where your career trajectories have gone. And we are currently kind of doing an update on it. So we're going to pull data for spring 2024 too, in case we need to look at it again in the future. All right, next slide, please. So as some great news is that the positions for research have really grown. So I think you can see 2012, I think there were a lot of single person offices. And as we've gotten larger and the office expanded, as of 2021, we've essentially doubled. So there are 432 positions now that we see in IRPE, which is a great thing in 10 years. Now you might be wondering which positions have grown. I think as the office has expanded, kind of the director, dean positions have kind of stayed the same because you've had one person for that and that'll stay the same. But we see some upward mobility in the sense of like vice president, vice chancellors are starting to see institutional effectiveness in their titles. And as more people are getting added to the office, you're getting more analysts, more specialists. But I think we're really seeing a growth in the senior analyst position because you're going from a 1-person, 2-person office to maybe 4 or 5 for the larger colleges or even 2 or 3. And you see the decrease in kind of the coordinator. I think kind of that with the faculty roles kind of being moved off, and now you're getting a full-fledged office. In terms of the career paths that we're seeing, we looked at people who start in the analyst role, and we kind of followed them to see where they end up. So 61% of the people that we saw as analysts remained as analysts. And I think it's important to reiterate here that this is just the career path that we're seeing. And we're not necessarily recommending anything or saying one is better than the other. This is just what we're observing. So of those 61, we see that it's being an analyst for about 4.8 years. 18% advanced to a director position within an average of 6.2 years. 11% advanced to a senior analyst position within 3.7 years, and 8% advanced to a dean position within an average of 5.8 years, those being the analyst. In terms of where you're going to move forward for your next position, we're seeing career advancement is a little bit of a mix. A little bit more than 50% end up going to a different district, and the other half or less than half remain at their same district. We also find that if you're remaining in your same position, you're not very likely to jump to another college for that same position. Usually you're having a title change when you do go to your next place. And then in terms of when you're going from analyst to senior analyst, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a mix. There's a promotion within the college, but then we also see that about half of you also go to a different district for that. From an analyst to a director, that we do see a big difference. So it seems like for analysts choosing to become a director, they have to go to a different district for that opportunity. And then for the analyst to a dean, we're seeing a little bit of a mix as well. So more than half are staying within the same district, but we're seeing a couple of folks that have to go to a different district as well for that.
I think this is an important slide for planning if people are interested to explore these ideas. So I think this is something that at least resonates with me. There are opportunities sometimes to advance within your own district or within your own college, but essentially that means that the person in that position has to leave. For that to happen, that is sometimes random. Sometimes it happens fairly quickly. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And so I think this slide would suggest that for people who are interested in potentially advancing, you have to start looking outside your own college or district, which means you need to start forming connections, etc. So this seems to be bearing out. This is at least one of my experiences that I have observed, which seems to bear out in the data here, that people who are interested in advancing might have to look at other districts in the area for that career advancement opportunity. The second thing is, I think, an interesting element. We started off with just looking at the salary scales. And so as Kevin mentioned, so we went and we downloaded it from all the districts because typically salaries are determined at the district level, not at the college level. And so we downloaded all those salaries. And as we then aggregated them by area, we very quickly saw that the coastal region typically have slightly higher salaries than others. We then felt that this is maybe not a very fair comparison, because it might look like you make more money, but many who will live along the coast know that this is, in terms of livable wage, in terms of affording a home, is not necessarily a true comparison. So the next slide that I'm going to show you, we thought that it might be more useful for the field to actually know how livable are the wages for analysts. And that was turned out not to be that easy of a comparison. There is many different ways to do this, and we've gone through many different iterations. So hopefully this one is helpful to you. So a couple of things. Number one, you will see a green shade and a red shade. So the green shade is a recommended salary should not be more than 35% of your monthly salary. So if you spend more on your principal and interest of a home that is above 35%, that does not mean you can't afford it, but that is against typical rules of affordability. Now, there's different values out there. So we picked 35, which seems to be a standard for if you spend more than 35%, then you're constraining your financial resources. So green suggests you could afford a home. Red means you're above that recommended threshold. In addition, there is a first salary step and a last salary step. And as you see these blue lines, some are much shorter than others. If it's a long line, that suggests that at that college or at that district, there is multiple steps, or there is big steps in between the steps in terms of salary scales. If the line is shorter, that suggests even you have fewer salary steps, or the salary steps are not as large. So that's the second piece. The third piece, so on the x-axis, you see the housing cost as a percent monthly salary of a starter home. And so what many statistics that you see out there, they often compare a median home price, and median home prices obviously are much higher because that's the average of a region. And so we looked at a starter home, which is the bottom quartile of a housing market, which is typically the entry home. Maybe that is a fair comparison for people who want to maybe buy a home for the first time. And as you will see on the left-hand side, you will see the districts. Some districts had different colleges in different regions because the home prices are in different counties. And so if two colleges are in two different counties, but in the same district, we broke it out by the actual college so that we could use the county prices. However, limitations here is, as you know, even within a county, so Kevin and I, we are in Orange County, although Kevin lives in San Diego. Orange County has big differences. Just because it's the same county, sometimes on one side of the highway is not the same as in the other side of the highway. So just looking at median home prices does not truly reflect a livable wage or affordability. But I think it's still an interesting analysis, because the good news, as you see, because this is only the top half, the next slide will show you the bottom half, is for most colleges and for most districts, being in institutional research suggests we do live in an affordable or we are granted salary scales that afford us to be able to own a home. If you can go to the prior slide, however, there are some that are not even first and salary steps. So as you see, Gavilan, San Jose, Evergreen, San Francisco too, maybe that surprised me too, just as the last salary step seems to be in the green over there. And I think we thought this might be very interesting, number one, to use this data so that you can potentially advocate at your district for rescaling of salary scales. As you may know, through HR, there is typically kind of a regional salary adjustment process. So maybe start kicking off that process for your college. That is one thing. And the other thing, maybe as many of you know, we have listserv of telling people that certain positions are available. You could start using this as advertisement if certain positions are open. So I think that is the good news that we have here. We are very fortunate that we are in a position that it seems institutional research is a livable profession. As we know, many of you, we're doing the career education or CTE analyses with our programs where livable wages are very important. Not only are these livable wages, but you can also afford a home. So I think that was very encouraging for us to see in that regard. All right, so these are just a few nuggets that we've had. So I think the big thing is IRPE has grown significantly over the last 10 years. So it has pretty much doubled in most positions. I think for many who have been in this field for 10 plus years can attest to this. I think it has grown both in terms of positions. My personal anecdote is I think also in terms of quality, we have more very, very strong researchers that are in this field who have advanced the field and are contributing to the field tremendously compared to in the past. I think maybe we've been in our office and people didn't even know what we did. Many institutional researchers are now deeply ingrained in the college structure and helping not only with reporting, but also decision making. So I think this is a great news as a fan of this field that has borne out in the data as well. However, there are limited opportunities for promotion within the IRPE field, especially that level from senior to director or dean. Those seem to be more restricted. So it seems to be easier if you are interested in career advancement from analyst to senior analyst. That seems to be a fairly good opportunity, but then moving to director is limited, which kind of makes sense if you have a large office of 4 or 5 analysts or senior analysts and you only have one director or dean. That immediately is, a 1 to 5 a chance that you have. And that's why we saw that for those who are interested, they often have to move districts or colleges in order to make that career advancement. But again, as I say, career advancement just in terms of title is one thing, but career growth does not necessitate necessarily a title change. Career growth can happen with many different ways. And that's why I'm excited with the panelists, how we can talk about how career growth can happen within a position as well as across positions. So promotion often requires moving to other districts, especially to that first manager or dean level. That seems to be the case, at least the way it's based on what we saw. Observed variability in whether salaries in certain regions are keeping up with home affordability. So there is variation. For most districts and colleges, it seems to be a very good affordability, but there are some that seem to be falling out of that range, which I think could be food for thought and action in terms of seeing how these salary scales can be adjusted for affordability. All right, I think that brings us to a close for the first part we have recommendations still. Create professional development opportunities that include recommendations and advice. So that's the second part. The panel hopefully will go into that in more depth, the recommendations and advice, and the salary competitiveness as well. The third piece is a favorite of mine. I strongly believe in building networks of contacts, because advancement is not only what you know, but who you know. That's my analysts know that from me. For every RP conference, student success conference, care conference they go to, they have to come back with 2 things. 1, a nugget of information that they didn't know. And 2, one person they have not known before. So connect with one person at that conference that they didn't even know before, because I believe building that network of contacts is an extremely important thing, not just in terms of advancing your own knowledge and connecting with people, but it's very important also from a advancement perspective. So you are aware of other districts and other institutions and other cultures, and for people to know you. So I think that is a very important element in terms of recommendation and thinking as a field as a whole. All right, I hand it over to Brad again. And so this is the exciting piece where I'm looking forward to hearing from the great panelists on advice and reflections on their trajectories.
Thank you for all the great research and guiding us through this, Loris and Kevin. All right, so for this section, we're going to have some participants or our analysts share exactly what their experiences have been. The first prompt here is we're hoping that everybody will share a little bit about their career trajectory within IRPE and how they navigated their path to where they are today. So here's kind of a two-part question. It is, where did you first begin that journey, and how have those experiences shaped you and your role today? And the second part is, what experiences did you find most valuable for your professional growth? And Bree, I believe you're going to be leading us off for this one.
Sure. Thank you so much, Brad. So just, quickly to mention kind of where I came from to get into this field. I think many of us come from graduate programs and enter into this field. I know I came from a psychology master's degree program and was fortunate enough to take my first job in a community college at San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton, which was an incredible place. I got to serve as a research analyst for the Title V grant there and was able to connect with amazing colleagues. My boss at the time was Matt Wetstein, who has gone on to become a president of a college as well. And I had the pleasure of working with the wonderful Alyssa Nguyen, who's here with us as well, during my time there. I'll just say in terms of shaping my experience, working in the Title V grant and working at Delta really helped me connect to not only where I grew up, because I grew up in the Central Valley, and I know about the challenges for higher education in Central California in terms of access and outcomes. And so being able to go back there, having moved away and then being able to go back and be able to contribute to things that align with my personal values of really eliminating barriers for students to access higher education, which is very near and dear to my heart. And to be able to actually have a job that paid a livable wage, speaking to what Loris and Kevin were presenting on, was really a wonderful thing for me to be able to do what I'm passionate about in a community college setting and in that particular part of California. In addition to that, I moved over to San Diego Mesa College and became an institutional research supervisor and grew that office from an office of 1 to 3.5 full-time equivalent positions during my time there. And that position was a really great experience to be able to connect with different folks on the campus, to really partner with incredible leaders such as, Dr. Harris, Dr. Wood at San Diego State, who were just incredible during my time there. I worked a lot with them at Mesa. We did a lot of work around building more equitable structures and processes and practices. And I collaborated with a lot of different folks and was able to gain leadership experience, not just in the kind of standard areas of program review and planning and outcome assessment, but in equity planning. And I really think that was a very transformational experience for me. And I had a lot of support. I got to give a shout out to Pam Lester, who hired me when I went over to Mesa. And it was a wonderful mentor as well. And then lastly, I'm here at Cuyamaca College now. I've been here for over 8 years. I've served as a senior dean of institutional effectiveness, success, and equity. Here at the college, we combine equity as a not just a practice, as a function, although it is a college-wide effort, with our institutional effectiveness model, because we can't have effectiveness if we're not being equitable. And so that's something that Dr. Juliana Barnes really created here at this college, and something that we've tried to carry forward over the past 8+ years since our office was created. I had the pleasure of serving as the interim vice president of student services for 1.5 years here as well, which was an amazing opportunity to really bridge research and practice and apply a lot of the things that we learn in our institutional research and effectiveness offices to actual student-facing offices as well. Lots of experience I find most valuable, but...
Okay, so I believe, Hannah, you might be next.
Sure. I think my experience mirrors a lot of yours, Bree. So maybe I'll kind of speak to the parts that are a little different. Because in my early career, I was exposed to a lot of really inspirational leaders and scholars like Sullivan Simone and Frank Harris, who have influenced a lot of like where I am today as the Dean of Institutional Research. But I think where I'm a little maybe atypical is I've only had 2 jobs in I'm almost 20 years working in IRPE, and it's been my only field and my only job. So I started 22 years old working in community colleges. And my first job was at Long Beach City College. And I worked there, I think, for 4.5 years as a research analyst. And the way that I got exposed to that was I was actually like you, Bree. I was a graduate student at Cal State Long Beach and in psychology, and I saw like a flyer saying internship opportunity to work at Long Beach City College. And I think that I was maybe like working 2 or 3 weeks, and then they had like a full-time position. So I was a full-time analyst working there. And so I've been in the field for a while, and then I moved to Santa Monica College here, and I've been in this role for 15 years. I just celebrated 15 years here. So it's an interesting when I got invited to be, on this panel. I said career trajectory. I was like, I really haven't moved or advanced much. What are you talking about? So I think though, when I think about that, kind of the first part of the question, like where did I first begin my journey, and how did that experience really impact it? I think I kind of want to talk about what I was exposed to. So I think a lot of it, I mean, people probably don't want to hear this, but a lot of it is about like being at the right place and being exposed to the right people, and a little bit of the luck. And so I think I was really fortunate to have really fantastic bosses that really trusted me with a lot of significant responsibility. So even as an analyst at Long Beach, I was exposed to kind of the inner workings of campus politics. I got to sit on committees that I probably shouldn't have been sitting on as an analyst, and I got involved in really strategic decisions. I got to present at board of trustees. I had no idea what I was getting myself into at 22 years old. And I got to sit in meetings with like the college president. But I think these experiences gave me a really good understanding of how colleges operate, how boards operate. And I also discovered very early on, I hate those kinds of things at that high level. So I think I understood my limitations. Like, I think I knew very early on, maybe I didn't enjoy being exposed to boards on a daily basis. And so that gave me, shaped my role as I really love being in the middle and leading from the middle. So I think that did shape. I know I do hear like, oh, like maybe, why don't you pursue these other opportunities? And I'm like, oh, why are you in why are you in this role for so long? And I think I do think about that a little bit, like I'm happy, kind of leading and being close to where it is. And so I reflect on that, like knowing my limitations and knowing what I enjoy. And so that's kind of shaped my career, I guess. I don't want to say trajectory, but it is trajectory, and where I am today. And kind of talking to what Laura said, why it's hard to advance. I think about my role in that, like, oh, I've been in the role for 15 years. So it is hard to move because people are in these director and dean roles for a really long time. And so I guess that's part of the reason why too. There's, most institutions that only have those types of positions, one of those. And so that probably plays a factor too.
So I think I'll give a I think a representation of the kind of fresh out of grad school that Hannah and Bree also talked about, because for me that was only 4 years ago. I finished my econ graduate degree straight out of San Diego State, and then didn't really know what to do. My background was not in education at all. I think I worked on like medical marijuana, same-sex marriage, and regulating commodities. So, nothing that was related to education whatsoever. And then for me, it was really kind of a moment where I just realized I didn't want to go to Chicago, because that's where my experience was in finance. And turns out, if you're born in San Diego, you can't really go to a place where it's cold. You just find out you can't do that. So for me, I think I had the same experience that a lot of people have, where you're just looking for jobs. You're just applying for different things. And then you see this education analyst, and you're like, oh, I looked into education policy during grad school. That's interesting. And then you apply, and next thing you know, like, I kind of had a fun time during the interview with Loris, and I didn't think I was going to get the job. Next thing I know, I get the phone call, and, you pick it up, and here I am. But for me, I'd say even in a short 4 years, you really can experience a lot of different things. I just took on the interim title for the senior. So kind of the example that Loris gave of, if somebody else in your position moves on, then you kind of can go into that position and get the experience of it. But I'd say even like within this role, I feel like, 4 years, I had the same title, but at the same time, I've been exposed to a lot of different experiences. So I'd say from I approach things from an econ background. So, at first you're just kind of onboarding in terms of program review, in terms of I started on the equity side, then moved into the SLO side. But at the same time, you got to start having, I'd say, kind of job satisfaction within as you get more mature in your position. For example, I think you build your connections at the college, and then that leads to you being able to implement more change. So for example, we had an EOPS program that was kind of, on feeling the impacts of COVID. And then as an analyst, you kind of go in and get to implement your, randomized control experiments. You get to change the application process entirely. So I think even from my perspective, it's been very enjoyable in the short years that I've been in the system. We can't say too much just because Loris is in the room, so we can't stroke his ego too much.
Loris, what do you have?
Yeah, I forgot who said that. I'm attributing to Terrence Willett, but at one point I heard the thing, nobody grows up and says, I want to become an institutional researcher. I think for most of us, it is by complete accident. I'm similar to Kevin. I just was not willing to move for a faculty position. And if you are located in Orange County and UCI is not hiring, then you have a very limited opportunity for faculty. And so I just Googled anything that had research in the title, and it just complete by accident. Kevin knows this. I like to share that. I felt guilty accepting the position because my wife allowed me to say, if you don't like it, you're allowed to quit after 3 months. And I just felt like a fraud that, like accepting a position and pretending to be in this position if I'm going to leave after 3 months. However, I could have never expected how much fun I have. My former boss said, I'll give you the keys to the data kingdom. And that's truly what it felt like. The heavenly doors opened and it was just angels singing. And I had suddenly access to a vast amount of data that I did not have in grad school. My experience in grad school and typical, social science is that you have to claw for every single data piece, and people who have good data sets guarded with their life. And you just always never can apply the things that you actually want to apply. And so I just had so much fun my first 2 years with all the stuff I could do that I did not had an opportunity before. So I completely fell in love with this position and this field. I also had the opportunity to work very closely and not only do the stats and the analytical piece, which I think many of us really enjoy. It was very enjoyable to then also see how it's being implemented compared to, I think, the typical academic pieces. You find something and then you publish, and then maybe that's your input. Maybe if you're really famous, you get invited to talk, right? Maybe you come. We invite these academics to our colleges and they can come and give us a webinar or a talk. But to see it one-on-one, the implementation of what you have found, if you see, hey, this is not working or this is working, and then they listen to you and then you see it and you can evaluate again what the changes are doing. There's very little, in my opinion, that gives you so much gratification in seeing that one-on-one impact of your research. And I think that's why I've stuck around. I think I'd still be a senior analyst, an analyst right now, if it just so happened that my boss left. And it just, it's a little bit of a lottery. It's very unfortunate to say, but it just so happened that he left. And if he didn't leave, I'd still be an analyst. So I think that is a very unfortunate situation. So for people who are interested in moving up, you have to look outside your own four walls. There's also opportunities. We did not go in the presentation on this, but obviously some people also go to the CSU and UC system, right? Institutional research is not just California community colleges. And also that the private sector, people go to more kind of think tanks, et cetera. The data became a little sparse there when we looked at it, but it does not mean that you only have to stay within the system. Although it is nice sometimes to, it's sometimes scary depending on how risk averse you are, which I am a little risk averse sometimes with my career choices. It's easier to stay instead of trying something new. But I do believe sometimes it's good to push yourself if you don't think either your skill set is valued, or if you think you want to see and learn from other environments. So I have now been fortunate that I was able to jump to the director level position. I've been in this director level position for almost 10 years. But I'm also looking forward to the question later in this webinar, because I think, as Hannah said, what we've noticed is after the director and dean role in institutional research, there is no clear line afterwards. So not only is it typical for people to stay in their position, but especially with an institutional research, there is no clear trajectory afterwards. Because after the director and dean of IRPE, there is no clear line. So you have to either jump to the student services side, or you have to jump to the instruction side. And there, typically, you are at a disadvantage because you didn't make those steps. If you're on the instruction side, you might not have the teaching. You don't have the teaching experience. You don't have the associate dean and dean experience. So that is challenging there. On the student services side, you might not have the experience of running a program. So in institutional research, it's more challenging to jump out of that IRPE role. And I think that is an additional reason why at the director dean level, once you're there, it's difficult to make that next step. And so I'm really interested in Dr. King and Bree Hayes to kind of say what that looks like if you jump out of that kind of IRPE silo a little bit.
Thanks for that transition, Loris. Dr. King, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, listening to all of you, I hear so much of just my own story. But my story is my initial career was very non-traditional as it pertains to institutional research and planning. So way back in undergrad, when I was at Cal State Northridge, I started off working on a project called New Stats. And this was where we captured all the surveys for the college. And I worked on that project for like the last 2 years. And so that was really where I got my feet wet with working on in data and with research. But from there, I actually finished my liberal studies degree and I went into teaching at Compton Unified School District. And I taught there for a while. I thought I would go all the way up teaching, to being a principal, vice principal. And like said before, I think someone said this, when I started my master's program, I actually started working at a research lab at the university. And that's where I became, it was twist. I actually left my job as a K-12 teacher, which I loved. I was there for several years. But it was many factors going on in my life, but I actually started being a research analyst, specialist at one of the research centers at the university where I was getting my master's at, and went through getting my doctorate, et cetera. Still working in a research center at the university. And then someone said to me, have you ever thought about, because I was a research, I went from a research specialist to an analyst at the university. Someone said, have you ever thought about applying to the community college? Do you know they pay really good? And it's so funny because my knowledge of the community college, I just was going to school. Never did I think like people actually work there, right? You're going to school, you're like, how did things happen, right? How did things go around? And they say, you should look at applying to the community college. There's actually a job open as a director of institutional research and planning at this college. And I was like, really? Didn't think that it would be me. And I go through the entire process. Now, at this point, I was a research specialist, research analyst at the university, had worked on multiple research projects. In fact, one of my projects was at LA Southwest College. I did their entire report for their first year experience program. I worked with Achieving the Dream as a data coach. So I had done a lot of work. And we had talked about a little bit of the career trajectory. The other way while I was doing all this research work, I did a lot of presenting. So people have seen me in this system presenting on all the work that I've done. As I was at different conferences, I would always go to conference and present on the work that I was doing, or partner with someone. We would do research projects together. And I ended up applying to be the Director of Research and Planning at North Orange Continuing Education, which this would be the first Director of IR in the state for non-credit. They never had a standalone non-credit Director of IR. And so reaching out to different folks who are in research and planning, directors, deans, I'm like, well, what do you think about the non-credit? Everyone was like, well, we're building it, right? There wasn't anyone just set in non-credit. They had designated a partial of maybe a research analyst at the time that was doing some of the work, but no one was completely just doing that work. So I was a little intimidated, but I ended up going to getting the job as the first Director of IR at North Orange Continuing Education. And I was one person in an office, and the goal was to develop a fully functioning research department. And this is where I think I met Loris and Bree and Hannah years ago. This was good 10 years ago. And I built a research department from scratch. It was a beautiful experience. I had the opportunity to hire some of the most diverse researchers who are still there. Dulce Delgadio, she's still there. Just amazing folks. The research team, I hired 4 of them, Harpreet, Dulce, and Jason Makabali. And we worked side by side for a good 3 years as the director, and they were my research analysts. And we did a lot of good work for, at the time, we were working on the non-credit adult launch board metrics. We were working with WestEd, it was about, again, a good 10 years ago, and trying to identify the metrics for the transitions for non-credit students. And so I was in that role for director of IR for some time. And this was at the time when many of you remember SSSP and the SEEP reports were coming out, and it was the 80-20, and we were doing the calculations. And so my president came over to me. She said, I think you should think about applying to the Dean of Instruction and Student Services. I had no aspirations of going in administration. I loved being in research. I loved the research team. And she said, you're leading the work for the SSSP. At the time, it was SSSP. Now it's SEEP. You're leading the work for SSSP. You've put the task force together. You've identified the disproportionate. It's all database, right? It's looking at disproportionate impact groups and who are the students that we're going to support through student services. How do you allocate the funds? And she said, you're leading this work, and you're also leading the guided pathways work at our college. And I ended up applying to an interim role as Dean of Instruction and Student Services, but I still had research underneath me. So I was doing the research, and I was had my research team and the Dean of Instruction and Student Services. And to Loris's point, I ended up having to leave because I was still doing research and overseeing all of those areas. I ended up leaving North Orange, and that's where I really saw my career advancement. I ended up getting a job at Southwestern College, where I became the Assistant Superintendent, Vice President of Student Affairs. But it was because of all of the work that I had done in research that I felt like it really prepared me to be successful in that role. I was able to understand FTS and FTEF calculations like the back of my hands because we were doing it manually at North Orange Continuing Education. I was able to understand, how do you calculate disproportionate impact? How do you look at labor statistics? Where other individuals, really that may not be their skill set because they may not come from research. And stayed in that role for about a good 3 years. And now I have been in my presidency role at San Diego College of Continuing Education for the last 3 years. So I went from non-credit to credit, and now I'm back at non-credit. And so I attribute a lot of my success and effectiveness to the work that I did in research, just understanding and giving voices to the voiceless. Very similar to what Bree talked about. All of the work that I've done has been framed with an equity lens. And the reason why I've been able to look at things as systems in a very unique way is because of the equity lens and the research background that I have. And so that's a little bit about my trajectory and how I've moved. But I do agree with some folks, sometimes you have to move to other institutions to grow.
Thank you, Dr. King. The second part of that first question is, what experiences did you find most valuable for your professional growth? And Bree, we're back to you.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to say, I think it's so important that we love the work that we do, because when you love the work and you pour your passion into the work, it really does open so many doors, and people really see that. So I want to acknowledge that when your why is very clear, I think it shows in the work that you do. And I think that, is a big piece of creating opportunities and having people kind of, as Tina mentioned, Dr. King mentioned, somebody comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, you should consider doing this. I really want to highlight that, because so much of my career has been because someone said something like that to me. And I'll just say, as a first generation college student, an Indigenous woman, imposter syndrome is real. And when someone comes up to you and says, hey, have you considered applying to serve on the RP group board? Have you considered applying for this position? Have you considered, taking on this role, even if it's not a position, but taking on, as Hannah mentioned, leadership work around your campus that you may not have thought of before, but people see the potential you have. It really is so critical to the work that we do. And I think, we want to remind ourselves about that, because we can be the people that help our colleagues see that incredible skill that they have and talents that they bring to this work if they don't see that for themselves. So I just wanted to mention that. I will say that I've learned so much from colleagues, both inside and outside the field. I can honestly say I would not be here today if it were not for those colleagues. I want to give a shout out to the RP group, because when I first started as an analyst, the work was incredibly challenging. Your first year is kind of like a boot camp. If you can't, just if you can stay through that first year, because there's so much getting thrown at you and the context is so new, especially if you're coming from outside the system, there's such a huge learning curve. And so for me, the first year I had some doubts. I was like, do I really want to be in this field? I'm not sure if I'm well prepared. I don't think I know enough. I don't think I have enough experience to do this. And being able to connect through the RP group through events and activities, I went through Summer Institute as well, really did provide that network of support and other colleagues that I could reach out to when I wasn't sure. If I got a new project thrown my way and I had no idea what I was doing, I could reach out and say, hey, have you ever had something like this? Or have you ever tried to do a project like this? This field is never boring. We always have new things, and things are always evolving. Our colleges, our systems evolving. We have so many opportunities, and I also just want to say I learned so much from our students. I cannot say that enough. Our students are absolutely incredible. And so, I know sometimes we can get stuck sometimes in research behind, doing some of the work that may not be directly student facing, but whether it's doing focus groups or interviews with students or participating in councils or committees with students, there's so much to be learned from talking to our students about their lived experience, learning from them, understanding their challenges, and really bringing that to light. I know Dr. King mentioned that too, amplifying the student voice, especially for students who've historically been marginalized and excluded from these conversations. We have a really critical role there. So that's been huge, so I really want to acknowledge our students. I've learned so much from our students. Stepping outside of the comfort zone, I think, is so important too, because our role may be whatever title, but taking on those additional projects or opportunities to collaborate. Hannah mentioned leading from the middle. No matter what position you have, you are an agent of change. So if you're able to work with folks across the college or across your district, community partners, there's so much that you can learn and do. And that, I think, is so valuable to the experience. And then adding that rich context to the work that we do. And then lastly, there's so much more I could share, but I want to be mindful of time. We've got other panelists who have so much to share as well. I'll just say that I think, I want to give a shout out to the leaders that I have worked with. I know others have mentioned that as well, but I've had very supportive bosses and supervisors. I've mentioned many of them. I'll also mention Dr. Jessica Robinson, my current president as well, for supporting this growth and development that, and all the other folks that I have mentioned that have been so critical to this. And I think, again, creating that community of support and having those opportunities, so much of it is people and relationships. And just want to give a big thank you to those who have been part of that.
We're in the same order, right, Brad? I'm also gonna answer Annie's question live, if that's okay, in the Q&A. So Annie, I think it kind of relates. It's been 12 years since I've been in school, since I graduated, since I got my doctorate. So I don't know if it applies. I think, like, in terms of like specific classes, I think all the technical stuff, like, like the tools and all of that, like we're researchers, we can all figure it out, right? There's YouTube videos for everything. I think the things that have been most helpful for me when I was in a doctoral program were the things that helped me think like at the 30,000 foot view. Like that still continue to help me. So things like accountability and the history of community colleges, because I'm like, why the hell do we do things the way we do? So I think as kind of like where I lead, those have been helpful. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Annie, as you think about pursuing your master's and thinking about what classes you want to choose. That's personally for me, and I'd be happy to chat with you after. But in terms of the experiences, I'm very similar to you, Bree. I think like focusing, like relationships are so important for me, and the things that have kind of sustained me are the people in my relationship. So I think my thought partners and my mentors have been so helpful for me, because those thought partners have like really challenged me to think more critically and creatively, particularly if you are been in the field for so long, right? You know, you kind of get in this place where you know, you kind of have a routine, and so I think it's really important to have people around you who offer different perspectives and offer new ways of thinking and insight, and have people around you who are your sounding board, and then, you know, folks that are in this panel with me, you know, those are, even if I don't talk to you all the time, like I think of you as thought partners, who still, you know, provide me encouragement, and you know, finding your people who are going to be your accountability partners, who tell you the difficult things to make sure to say like, hey, have you followed through in doing the difficult work, as leaders, and, you know, provide you the inspiration. And so, and then finding the mentors. And also, even if like when people like reach out to me and say, hey, Hannah, can you be my mentor? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm still at the place where I should like find mentors. So like in your, you know, like think of yourself, not even like Kevin, you're like, I'm here 4 years. Like you can still be a mentor and still be mentored, right? So like finding those relationships that go both ways. So, and I think, you know, as even no matter how many years you've been in your career in IR, always finding someone who's already been there to offer you that perspective, so you can see things more clearly. So that's been very helpful for me. And then the second thing is, I think, you know, what I've learned is, I think in the beginning, I wanted to be good at everything in our fields. Like I wanted to learn every single tool and be good at everything. Like I wanted to be like the jack of all trades, like the Renaissance woman. And I think what I learned is I kind of leaned into like being more deepening in expertise in something that I was most passionate about and most wanting to have like impact on. And that felt the most empowering to me. So like unlocking that has been really impactful for me. And so like for me, that meant I want like what I care most about was equity and empowering practitioners and those around me to learn how to use data and create to advance equity, right? And so instead of trying to like learn everything, like absolutely do I want to learn the latest like AI tools? Yes, to some extent I'm going to have to do that, and I do that. But do I have to be an expert on all of the like new emerging like data tools? Like maybe not. Maybe someone in my team could do that, and I just more deep like lean into the learning and mastering the things that I care about most. So I think that's kind of where I've landed is focusing on like the racial equity things that I love, because that's more enriching and satisfying for me. And then it's like when you're not straying away from like what you said, Bree, your why. It's much more it like fuels you a little bit easier. So yeah.
I think most of what I was going to say echoes what Bree and Hannah already said, but I feel like I think for a lot of people new in the field, I feel like that hard part is really putting yourself out there. You know, when you go to the RP conference, Strengthening Student Success, I feel like when you're brand new there, you really do have that imposter syndrome. You don't really want to ask any questions, right? Because you're like, am I even asking the right question? What if I ask a, terrible question? And I think the thing is, it's such a melting pot of all the different like kind of what we said earlier, like everybody has a different master's degree, everybody's coming from a different place. So I think knowing that all of us have unique perspectives, I think really makes it more valuable, and should make it that don't feel uncomfortable asking those questions. So that's kind of my tidbit is really just be comfortable connecting with everybody whenever you're going out there, because you're all coming from different backgrounds, you all have different perspectives. I think a little bit of a cheat, just because I'm fortunate to come from an office, which with a strong stats background, is that you get to latch onto them, and you kind of latch onto your mentors and have them introduce you to people. Like for example, like Terrence is a great person to. Everyone out there is willing to kind of be that person to introduce you to other people too. For example, let's say you want to get better at SQL, or there's something you want to. There's always someone that knows how to do it, and they're more than willing to help you out. And I'd say like I'd say one other thing is, you know, kind of in the interest of the RP conference coming up soon, or maybe for next year because the deadline's passed. But like everybody's doing interesting work. Like I would submit because sometimes you have a great idea and somebody has that, you know, maybe something to add on to it. Next thing you know, you come back, you bring it back to your college, and that's how the change happens. So I'd say just really know that everybody is really welcoming. So it's a good opportunity just to talk with whoever you can talk to.
All right, I'll hope not to go too big on a tangent, but I have one nugget of thing that has helped me, and I think it is a very important principle that is many people can use. I'm butchering it probably, but it is essentially saying you need to start doing right now what the next level position is doing. So you cannot expect to get a different level position if you're not able to do the work of that position, which is fundamentally unfair. And I have seen that too, is especially, let's say, from an analyst or senior analyst to your first management role, the way the interviews are structured, and there is hoping I'm not going too big on a tangent, but I am a little bit upset the way we interview people and the way we hire people. It is very classic that people are saying, here's the job description, and then they look at the job description and they click interview questions based on the job description. And then if you do it that way, you immediately bias it for people who already have that experience. So for instance, for a director level position, you says, well, what is your experience with managing people? And then you're an analyst and a senior, you've never managed people. Bam, you get marked down for that question. Or you're asking questions, well, how have you led guided pathways? And how have you led a large initiative at the college? Well, guess what? I didn't, because I wasn't the director. So this is by default a bias that is happening in the system. So how do you counteract that? That's also where the luck comes in, right? So it is not a surefire way to do it, but you need to, as much as you can, prove that you can do that in your capacity to do that, even if you don't have that title. As you hear on this panel, we've been lucky to have bosses and people that we report to that have supported this advancement, but you don't need to wait for that. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Just do, and then sometimes you realize you can actually do, because if you asked for permission, they would have said no. So examples, for instance, most people don't like writing reports. So those C reports, guided pathways reports, all the grant reports, people don't like doing this. And the typical thing is for you as a research office is you just provide the data, right? So the typical is, hey, can you give me for 2.A, I need, I don't know, the transfer rates. How about you write the report? Because you didn't ask for permission, you just volunteer, you take it on, then you actually have an experience to say, no, I was the primary writer for our C plan, or I was the primary writer for our guided pathways plan. And then you can build that resume, even though you were not given the opportunity, because it is very unfair the way we hire people. It is always, and if you look at it, just look at your neighboring colleges who got that director or dean position. It is often people who have had director and dean positions in prior positions. So this is a challenge in our thing. I want to be very honest about this. So you can build your resume as much as you can, but no, typically the way people hire and the way it is also for first management position is typically non-researchers that hire it. So if you are on a director level or dean level position, it is typically the VPIs or the presidents that hire those positions or on those interview committees. And they're not researchers. You might be the greatest researcher on the planet. If you cannot speak their language and understand what they're looking for, then you will not be able to shine in the interview. So I think that was one key piece that I was given that advice is saying start doing now and behave now as you had that title so that you look like that person once the interview comes up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Loris. I agree with a lot of what you all said. And so in terms of what experience did I find valuable, in terms of my career trajectory and growth and how and what's helped me is a lot of it has been said already, but I do think that there is absolute power in networking. One of the things that I always did every single year that I went to a conference, I didn't just focus on meeting someone new. I always met new people, but I also focused on strengthening intentional relationships. So if I knew I was going to the RP group conference for 2 days, then I was going to make sure I had a breakfast with one of my friends that I've met now, my colleague in the network, a lunch with another one, and a dinner, right? I'm there 2 days, and I would always try to make every year it was like almost like a family reunion, and it just strengthened those relationships. The other thing I realized is that this system is so small, whether you're in research, wherever you are, we all know each other. Again, Bree, Hannah, and Loris, 10 years ago, we've been doing this work for years. I still know them from way back when. And so that's another piece I've always tried to work on, strengthening and building bridges with individuals and creating intentional relationships, because I think it is helpful. One, in many ways, as you continue to ascend, you will meet people that will teach you new things, but there will be an opportunity possibly at one of these, these districts. Bree, in fact, was in one of my interviews when I got the job. I remember that I had thought about it in San Diego. I had got offered a job as an executive dean of PRE, of Institutional Research and Planning, and Bree was in the interview, right? And this was after years knowing her, and I was trying to get out to San Diego where my family was, but the system is small, so networking and creating very intentional relationships. I too, very similar to what folks said, I've heavily been a part of RP group in some way or some fashion in all of my roles. Back when years ago, we did not have a non-credit RP group. I went to Darla Cooper. I think it was maybe her second year of her president as leading the RP group, and I asked her, "Can we develop an RP group?" And she was in support of that. But it was those relationships that through that opportunity, we were able to create relationships, more non-credit researchers in the field, and I believe it's still going on to this day. So I would again say the networking, attending conferences that will be helpful, and also presenting at these conferences. So just as much as you're there to learn from people, people are there watching you, right? They're like, oh, you're an expert in this area, and they're interested and they're following up, and then you start to create these connections as well. And I think it's always helpful to share the information as a service, right? Paying it forward to others. Another thing that I've tried to do is I've tried to always, when possible, if there's an article being written, I always try to get involved from the research perspective. There's about 3 different articles right now that I'm working on. I always try to stay as much involved as possible, even as my role as a president, with research-based articles and different policy briefs. So I would say that's another great opportunity, is the writing, as well as networking, creating intentional relationships, going to these conferences, but then the writing. I always serve on a dissertation committee. It's a lot of work, but it's necessary. I learn so much. My favorite piece is the methodology, but also helping someone else as they go through their own career development, career trajectory is another thing that I've tried to do. And so those are just a couple of things that I would say. I also agree with what has been said. The shift from me going from a research analyst to then becoming a director, overseeing a team, I knew that I needed some professional development growth. So what I did is I joined ACA 101. ACA 101 has an administrator for 101 first level administrators. There's an entire year fellowship that you can go through. I applied. I was a part of ACA 101. When I became a dean, I did Dean 101 through ACA. And it's the Association for the Community College. I forget what the last A is, but ACA is well known. So I would say get involved with ACA, do as many professional developments as possible. I think it was said already, but I believe a coach should always be coachable. Even if you're not in the game, you should still be coachable. Even still in my presidency role, I've done Wheelhouse. I've done the Aspen Aspiring Presidency. When I was a vice president trying to become a president, I did the Aspen Aspiring Presidency. And in the midst of being an Aspen Fellow, I got my presidency because they saw the list of individuals who were the who asked and selected. And I was getting contacted consistently. And so now that I'm in the presidency role, I'm still a part of Wheelhouse. It's a professional development for presidents. So I say that to say at every level, consistently do professional development. It's another way to network, but also to learn and grow from others and to learn about who you are. And this is the last thing I'll say. I think it's really, really important that we have to know who we are. As we're in these roles as leaders, it's so important to be very comfortable who you are. Bree, you're spot on. This, imposter phenomenon is so real. I remember when I was in my director role, I would shake at the thought of speaking in front of a lot of people. And it wasn't that I didn't know it. I just would be so nervous all the time. So you have to be able to trust yourself and know that you have everything in yourself to be great. And so building your confidence is also a big piece of being able to navigate these roles. And I saw in the chat, someone said, I'm comfortable staying in my research role, and that's okay too, right? Like if you found your passion and you're happy, that's okay too. But as long as we're continuously paying it forward and giving to others, I think it's important.
Okay, next question here is, what advice would you give others who might be looking to contribute and maximize research and data for institutional effectiveness?
So to kick that off, I think one of the big things, and this is coming from, not that we didn't do this before, but definitely since I went into student services, learning a lot about the functional areas we work with, because if we get to know how they operate and we get to know how we can support their work, not just in providing kind of standard research projects and reports and things like that, but how can we help streamline their work in ways that we might not have thought of? I think that goes a long way because that builds empathy and understanding with our practitioners, and then they're going to be more likely to use the information that we're providing through our research. So, I think that's a huge piece of it. Not just coming in and saying, okay, here's the data, here's what it says, but really working with them as thought partners and building that overall partnership. I would also say that keeping an open mind, because we have practitioners from different parts of the campus, they're going to bring in different perspectives to the work, and seeing what we can learn from them as well. Just a couple other points, I would say, being mindful of feedback we get on how we tell the data story. I think we do have to be open to feedback about what resonates for our practitioners and what might not. And if there are ways that we can adapt and adjust for different audiences, different practitioners, to really maximize impact, I think that's really important. And then lastly, I think we need to keep learning and listening to students. The student voice is so powerful, and not only does it validate the findings we're seeing from our quantitative data, but it's far more powerful than any story we could tell. And so, I really want to say, however we can incorporate our students, whether it's bringing in student interns in our offices, having student panelists, partnering with ASG, partnering with our different affinity groups or other student groups on campus, I think is so important.
Kevin, I think we're going to jump to you for this one next.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say, so I do what Bree does. I say, just go visit other offices. Sometimes you don't know what they're doing. And one, it's good to learn what they're doing. But two, it's good to see maybe there's places that you can solve because we come from a technical background. Like the crazy one I saw was like, they're counting up student appointments for their program, and you got to have 3 appointments a semester. So they have like 600 students and they count them manually. And they're like, all right, this was January 6th. I need 2 weeks out from that. All right, that's January 20th. And I could not believe it. I was like, that is like 120 hours of work a month that you have to do. And, that's stuff that we can build out really easily. So that's one way where you can be really effective from the data side. And I'd say another thing, maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but reach out to IRPE Group. They have research opportunities that are going to be maybe outside of your skill set that you can build your skill set out on that, or if you're an expert in something, you can contribute on that side. I used to be like, I'm the SQL guy inside at Irvine, and then next thing I know, they need a SQL guy to bring up to the chancellor's office. And now instead of looking at just within the college view, I'm looking at things from a system-wide view, and you'll learn that there's different nuances of looking at things from a system-wide view as opposed to just a college view. So from your personal like building up your skills there, that's a facet that you can also leverage too. On the flip side of being able to work on things that maybe you're not as comfortable with. So I hate grant writing. Guess who had to do a grant last year for our P group? This guy. So like you're able to build skill sets you're uncomfortable with and work on things you're comfortable with, but you can bring that back to your college, and that's kind of where you can make the difference in-house.
Yeah, I was literally going to say the exact same thing as Kevin said. So, one other nugget of wisdom that I've heard once is a lot of researchers treat others like data providers. So, we often reach out to people and say, hey, give me the data. Hey, you did not submit the data. Or, hey, please complete my survey. And if you constantly only treat people as data providers and then you come up with a presentation, it's a very passive way and often an antagonistic way. So we just tell people to please submit and make sure that your data entries are correct. And then we go into a black hole and come out with some pretty graph and then are surprised that nobody listens to us. So how do you break that mold that we are essentially the data, we ask people to provide data? And this is exactly what Kevin has said. We've seen a big change in the atmosphere and the collegiality is if we actually help people, because we have a skill set that is not just in terms of analysis and seeing if things work, but we can help them. And this is not just an anecdote. Kevin has probably 4, 5, 6 examples of this where we sit down with somebody, please show me what you do. And you realize some of these positions are literally copy pasting the same thing every day. You're like, why are you doing this? Like, I can do that for you. Suddenly you open up that person's job. I cannot imagine that copy pasting the same thing over and over and over again for the entire year is satisfying. And suddenly if they now see you as an ally because you've helped them in their job, they're maybe willing to look at that graph that you provided. And I think that is why in the very beginning I said that's why I love my job so much, is because one-on-one we can see the impact that we can have, not just in terms of our analysis, but just in terms of our technical skill set, helping people do their day job better, which then frees them up because maybe they are open to changing their program or changing their process because you show them, listen, it is not equitable the way we let people into our programs. The people that are in our programs are actually not meeting the criteria that you're saying you're looking for. So these things suddenly become much more palatable and much more open to discussion if they trust you because you've helped them on something they actually needed. And so I think that is number one, an extreme pride of mine that we've been able to establish. And it is because you have to take time, you have to get out of your cubicle. And I know we as researchers often are maybe more introverted and maybe more socially awkward and more, I don't know, not as willing to go outside, but getting out, sitting down with people, looking at their processes, seeing how we can help. And I think that goes at every level. I'm trying to do that in my position as well, to try to understand what deans and VPs are doing, because maybe I can help the same way and show them, and that increases the trust between me and other higher level positions to see how I can make their life easier. And suddenly they realize, oh, if we look at the data, that helps us with decision making. If I look at it this way, it actually helps me solve this problem. So I think it is a very good nugget of wisdom to help them first before you tell them how they're wrong or how their outcomes do not align with something. Then they're much more willing to listen.
One of the things that I think helped me a lot was working on the accreditation. I remember when I first got into community college, it was perfect timing, that we were going through our accreditation process. That entire document helped me. The entry, the first chapter is the data. You look at the profiles and the difference between the community profiles to the institution profiles. You get a chance to see everything and you tell the story. I had the opportunity to, at the time, I was the only researcher. I wrote the entire first chapter. And as I went through and continued to read this entire, the accreditation is a lot in there, but it helped me connect the dots to everything and understand the different programs and who worked where. And I started to be able to put value to each of these individuals who are doing all of this great work, even though it wasn't in the research department. And so from there, I was able to start to create these connections, but I learned so much through just the accreditation process. So if you ever have the opportunity to get involved with the accreditation process, you should. If you ever have the opportunity to get on the strategic planning process, you should. The strategic planning was, for me, it opened my entire eyes. I was able to see the integration between resource allocation to how the program review and how the college funds. And, it helped me to see equity from a different lens, because they say money is the great barometer of really the equity lens of the college and the leadership. And so it was through that process that I was able to understand what the college's visions truly was and how we were going to work and the objectives that we were putting in place to reach those goals. And that all is data. And so if you ever have the opportunity to be a part of those two projects, from the strategic plan, you'll learn about the SLOs. And I think all of that will help just a researcher in general, regardless if you want to continue to ascend and transition to another position or just connect in your own internal campus. So those are a couple things that I think about in terms of, advice and nuggets. And then the other thing I would say, I had shared, I won't ask them to bring it up, but I have always been able to use my background in data, but looking at labor market data, looking at other statistics. Oh, look at you, Brad. Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you all is I've been able to look at, as a college president, look at the data of our programs. And I do this by labor market data so that we can really think about equity and economic mobility for our students in a very different way. And so I look at all of our programs, and I really think about the return on investment for the student. So if we're offering a CNA program, and I know that the livable, I know what the livable wages is, and a student can make about $38,000. If they're in their certified nursing assistant program, then it's advantageous for us to develop an LVN program, which is what we're in the process of doing. And that was after my first year of my presidency and looking at this labor market data, looking at median data of income. And this specific, I was able to get this from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so from there, I was able to see that our students who are graduating from our amazing free program in our certified nursing assistant program, they're making $38,000. That's not enough to live in San Diego. Laura started off by talking about livable wages in San Diego. There's no way a student can live and be sheltered, et cetera. And so we're in the process of developing a licensed vocational nursing program so that they could make about $60,000. But the goal is to use data to create pathways for our students to go from CNA to the LVN to an RN program, the registered nursing program, and hopefully one day to the BSN. And so this is just, I wanted to share this. And Brad, if you can go to the next slide. I've been looking at, oh, okay. So this one, I thought it was another one, but this also is the child development labor market data for our child development certificate programs, because we have a lot of students who are coming in, ESL learners who come through the certificate programs who come because they want to make livable wages. And so I've been able to look at different data and bring it to the college and say, why haven't we, this is where our students are in terms of their wages. We need to think about how do we help them get to six figures and how do we create these pathways. And so I just wanted to share that, looking at different data sets, and this was just an example of nuggets that you can do for different individuals, our programs, our faculty members, our departments, partnering with them to look at other different data sets that maybe they're not even aware of or even thinking about, that is tied directly to labor statistics.
Okay, final question we have here is about transitions. So looking for that advice again for folks who might be interested in transitioning maybe from research analyst to senior analyst, possibly analyst to dean or director, and then also folks from maybe an IR manager position to a campus executive, and even possibly outside of the IR realm. So transitioning from maybe an IR dean or director to maybe a VPI or a VPSS, something along those lines. So Bree, I was wondering if you can kick us off for this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of what has been said, I'm just going to try to tie a ribbon around some of what we've already said too. Taking on leadership roles that go beyond standard research typical projects, I think are really important, particularly for those who are looking to go outside the field. So really building those partnerships and collaborating with folks in those other areas. As we've already kind of shared, getting to know other functional areas and building some knowledge and awareness of the context and expertise around that work. Serving as a committee or work group member, I think, is really important as well, because people get to see your skills, knowledge, the perspectives you bring, and the work ethic you bring to the work. And then lastly, I think that what I want to speak to mostly on this piece is kind of two parts. One is if you're going to be transitioning out of an IRPE field into like student services or instruction and or into an executive position. I just want to say that equity-minded, and I put a little bit of this in the chat, but equity-minded, evidence-based decision-making is critical to any leadership role on a campus. And I just think that's really important for us to be aware of, because those skills matter. And so when, going over into an area like student services, there's a lot of folks that may not, they have their like little piece of the data, right, that they work with, but they may not be used to the bigger picture. And so we typically have a 30,000-foot perspective that we bring to this work, which is very unique, because a lot of areas kind of focus on one part of the puzzle, right? Maybe a very large part of the puzzle, but we're trying to see how all those pieces fit together. And I think that systems thinking is so critical, and can be really beneficial to advancing in an area outside of the IRPE field, as well as within the IRPE field. We already talked about learning the context for that work. In terms of serving in executive level positions, when you're in a cabinet level position or as a president or CEO, one of the things, like our cabinet has like a book club kind of, we read, right now we're reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I'm going to leverage some of the things that are stated in there that really resonate. And that is, when you're in an executive level position, you have to be comfortable making very difficult decisions. And you have to be open to admitting when you made the best decision you could at the time, but it may not have been the best decision, right? And understanding that there's going to be that challenge, like, Brene Brown refers to it as a rumble. And I think that, those are very courageous things that have to happen. You have to have the courageous conversations that are really hard, because it is not easy to be an executive leader when you're serving in that role, having been in middle management and then being in a cabinet level role. There's just a lot of critiques that can come forward, right? And it's very, like, it's I don't want to say it's kind of lonely at the top, it kind of is. It's really difficult. And so bringing all the skills that you're learning in these other areas and transitioning into that level work, I just want to say, I think it's really important. It's okay, there's going to be some fear stepping into a role where you're in such a very public position on your campus, but bringing all the skills and the knowledge and experience that you have with that 30,000-foot perspective, and knowing that fear can exist with courage at the same time, and being okay to step into those uncomfortable situations, and leading with your why, leading with students in mind, and bringing, again, that equity-minded, evidence-based approach, I think, is so important to those roles.
I have two pieces of advice. The first one is craft your job. So what I mean by that is take initiative to redesign part of your current job in your role to better align with your passion and your strengths. So, talk to your boss, talk to your current supervisor and say, I want to, kind of redesign what I'm currently doing to work more on this part of my job and expand this role, or, without really changing the core responsibilities, right? Obviously, some jobs are unionized and all of that stuff. And so that gives you an opportunity to have stretch opportunities or to make your work more meaningful. So I think there's ways to advance your career in that way. And I think talk to your supervisor, because as a person who supervises people, I cannot guess and know what your interests are, right? And so I think being clear, like managing your supervisor is part of that as well. And number two, I experiment with side projects. I do a lot of that. That's why you see me all the time. So I work on projects and collaborations outside of SMC. And honestly, that has re-energized me. I think there was a question kind of in the Q&A about I think the word was stale, I don't know if I and so I think, that kind of exposed me to a new set of people, new set of skills, kind of broadened my expertise, and added a fresh dimension to my work and my job without requiring me to get a new job or a promotion. So that's my two pieces of advice.
I'll keep it quick because I know we're reaching the end of the webinar. I'll do two things too. One thing, kind of reiterating what Hannah said, I think we're in the system. They don't need to pay BCG to do education consulting for community colleges. We're in the system. We probably know it better. So why not ask us to do it? So reach out for opportunities for that. IRPE is a great source for helping you link to the people who need that. And then I think just to reiterate, like it is a little bit of luck, right? Like I got mine because Finn happened to get pushed somewhere else. So someone's got to do his job. So that's what I'm doing now. But I think if you're interested, I think just reiterating the presentation, like if you want to take that leap and you're willing to make that move, being able to move to another college, as for example, like let's say you go to like maybe a more rural location, that's going to get you that next position you want, and then that's going to let you move to the next position after that.
Well, thank you so much, Loris. My two pieces of advice. Number one is students first. I think in everything that we do, as long as we do it with our students in mind so that they have the best outcome, I think that's the most important. As a president, I have to make very challenging decision, and leadership is not about appeasing anyone. You have to be comfortable not being liked, and you have to, and that has to sit well with you and be okay with it. But as long as you know that you've done or made the decision for the students, that is the most important thing. And then the second piece of advice I would say is appreciate your people and show them. And just an example is when I first got to the college that I'm currently at, my researchers did not have a space. They were like in a closet. It was unreal. And so I wanted them to see that I value you. I see you. I appreciate what you do, because I'm always going to be a researcher at heart. And so we've developed an entire research center. And so even if you don't have the ability to create a center for someone, but appreciate the people around you, right? Or even your boss and the people you work with. I think that's really important. So folks know that you care about them. And I think that indirectly connects to the first one. When people are happy, your students are happy. And so those are my two pieces: students first, and appreciate your people and show them you appreciate them.
Thank you very much, Dr. King, and all the other panelists. This was a tremendous session. Super grateful to have all of you here. We did want to have everybody stay tuned. There's more coming here. I'm going to go ahead and share a link to a brief that we've come up with for all of the data and information that was shared by Loris and Kevin at the onset. So you can find a link to that there. And we have an infographic coming also. So both of these items are going to be released on the RP Group website in the near future, as well as a recording of this session. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody.